right, so 6:31. Good evening. It is 6:31, and I will call us to order. And I will read the roll. John, present. Sue?
Present.
Phil?
Present.
Neil?
Present.
Mike?
Here.
Mark is absent. Matt?
Present.
And alternates, Zach Terrell is absent. Michael Bouchard?
Present.
Peter? Absent. And Brad?
Yes.
Okay. We have one, right? One absence. So, Michael, if you would like to serve as a voting member this evening.
Yes, I would. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So next we have our review of minutes. And the only thing that struck me was Lisa Estes.
Uh-oh.
This is presumably Gigi.
What?
That's Gigi Estes?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, GIS.
It says Lisa Estes on here a few times.
Oh.
I assume that
Do
would
you
be.
know how to spell it?
Gisela?
Yeah.
G-I-S-E-L-A.
That's right, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Gigi, yeah, but
Oh,
officially,
I didn't realize her name was Gisela.
German.
I know, I always know her as Gigi. Yeah, thank you.
I'm pretty sure that that's who Lisa was, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you have any extras?
So Joseph?
Yes.
One point of correction on the minutes
Mm-hmm.
was Lisa Estes is Gigi Estes, or properly Gisela Estes, Gisela. I didn't see anything else glaring to me.
Knowing that my motion can still be amended, I'm going to move that we approve the minutes with the noted amendment of correcting Lisa to Giselle.
Second.
Any further discussion? Or anyone need another moment?
Further amendments, still ripe if anybody wants to.
Good to go? Matt, you're hard at work?
Good.
Okay. Okay, well, so all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? All right, the minutes are approved with those, one change, amendment. Next up, do we have public comments not related to business on the agenda this evening? All right. Next up, we have communications received, and I believe there are a couple of letters we've received.
Yes, absolutely. So a couple of communications have been received, primarily 2 letters requesting appointment to the planning board have been received from members of the public who are present this evening. As per the select board's recent request, they've asked that folks interested in being appointed to one of the town's local boards meet with that board prior to the select board's vote. So that's why this is on communications tonight. I can read the letters if you'd like, or the board could review them and discuss them with the
It's also worth noting, as you clarified, when our bylaws say that the select board is allowed to approve or appoint up to 5 alternates, that apparently does not include, as I think is the common assumption,
The select board.
the select board alternate.
That was, yes, that was my miscount by reviewing only one part of that. So the planning board is authorized 5 alternates and 1 alternate for the select board representative, and that is in the bylaws and in statute, RSA 6736.
I think we've been counting as one opening, but in fact
Correct.
there were two.
In fact, there are two. That is correct, to my understanding now.
Anybody want Joseph to read them as he offered?
I don't think it's necessary to read
I've
it.
read them.
I've read them myself. so-
Okay.
Say the names, we can say the names.
Yeah, we can. John Randlett and Molly McCann.
Nice.
Do we want to offer the applicants an opportunity to introduce themselves, or?
Put us for-
Do you want to be put on the spot and say a few words, or do you want to let your letter stand as is? If you do, to come up to the podium. Otherwise, it's okay not to as well.
Again, my name is John Randlett, Plymouth resident. I was served on the planning board for 7 years, selectman's rep when I was on the select board 3 or 4 years. So would like to I took a little time off after losing an election, and so I'm ready to go back and work, help the town out.
Are you willing to take a question? I
Yes.
question your mental. You got out of this. Why are you coming back? Are you sure you're okay?
Well, you know, as we get older, we have these lapses in memory. I'm sure if I got back on the board after 6 or 7 meetings, I'd say, now I remember why I got off. So, but yes, I'm interested in serving the town, and like I have in the past. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
So Molly McCann. I don't have much more to say besides what I said in my letter. I'm a trained designer, born and raised in Plymouth. I have a strong interest in learning how to be more a part of the planning of the town's future. And I'd like to learn by being part of the planning board. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer questions.
All right, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
At this point, the select board, as Joseph mentioned, is asking the planning board for any input or feedback or guidance in their process before they make an official appointment to the board. So we can provide guidance, and then we still kick it off to the select board with our guidance to make an appointment or not, as per their discretion.
I don't know if we need a motion, but I would support both of the applicants that have expressed an interest at this point.
We have 3 alternates right now, correct?
We do.
Okay.
So that would be all the alternates filled.
Beautiful.
Correct. We'd have a full board.
More the merrier.
But alternates are also eligible for, continuing education opportunities, they're,
Discussion?
yeah.
I would second Phil's motion if that's
I support them both as well.
I appreciate that we have interest from 5 alternates at this point.
Yeah, that's a
I'm
big
glad
deal.
that Mr. Puffer's joined us as well.
Thank you.
I appreciate the fact that we're getting some younger people on the board, and I also think that having a person that has sat on the board with experience is also very valuable. So I feel like we're getting the best of both ends here.
I like the idea of having a broad perspective of the community.
You too? All right.
Fred, did you make a motion, or just a kind of general consensus?
I wasn't sure if we needed a motion.
I don't think we need a motion necessarily. Nothing's stopping you from making one. We can just also, if no one really disagrees, just kind of broadly support.
Decision by consensus?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm okay with that.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you both very much.
Thank you.
All right, so the next select board meeting is this coming Monday. I'm not sure if the board can accommodate appointments on their agenda this quickly. So the next select board meeting would be, do you have that date, Neil? I think maybe, so the 10th and the 24th might be those meeting dates. But can always check in with either myself or Scott Whedon or Ann Abair to confirm, getting on the select board agenda. Their next meeting is the 10th, but we'd have to just confirm that their
Ready for that.
agenda is open.
All right. Any other communications?
So there was a communication received that was referenced in the earlier site visit from Danielle Sargent, which was communicated by her verbally as well, an invitation to enter her property and view the hotel site. There were also 2 other letters that were received for the public hearing on the hotel that were pertain to the project generally, which I'll certainly share with the board as well. One from a local community member and another from the Rumney town administrator. So I'll share both of those with the planning board as well, and any others that may come in before the hearing as well. Certainly, we've gotten a few letters prior to each of the hearings so far. I expect we may continue to get some as we get closer, but I'll put those all together and share those.
All right, thank you. So reports of committees. So the Housing Committee. My list of notes to myself keeps getting longer on this one. So first of all, we had a community meeting, as many of you attended, on Monday, and I think it went very well. We had a good attendance and lots of interesting feedback, and and I believe the video from that did not go live on Pemmy Baker TV, but at this point is on YouTube, and I suppose probably I've never actually seen Pemmy Baker TV on a TV. I know it plays on like broadcast TV, but I'm not even sure how the schedule looks.
I bet Dan could tell us if we asked him.
Oh yeah. I always watch on YouTube. What else? About the Housing Committee. So at this point, we have. So Bruce has resigned from the committee. Brian Eisenhower has not been present for quite a while at this point. I know Brian Chalmers is going through some transitions as well in his life. And we've only got about a month or so left of this project. And we do still have a little bit more to do in that month or so. In other words, with our current committee, we don't really have the ability to form a quorum anymore. And as a subcommittee of the planning board, I'm asking the planning board if for the duration of the remainder of this project, if we'd like to pull this back onto the board to get it run through rather than looking for new members of the housing committee for like 1 month.
I think that would be fine, but I think we should invite the remaining members of the housing committee that aren't planning board members to continue to participate.
That's a good idea, yes. Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to remember who else is on the committee other than Patty.
Patty.
Is that it at this point?
Well, there's Brian Chalmers. I'm not sure I know he couldn't make some of the recent meetings, but I'm not sure if he's willing to kind of fill out another month or so, just kind of
I think it's
joining us.
important.
I'll certainly make the offer.
Yeah, it's important that they have the opportunity to continue to participate if they choose to, since they've put this much work in so far.
Yeah.
I mean, it just seems like we're not going to have a quorum at this point, and it would seem silly to ask for new members for a month.
So what do you want to do with it?
Since it's a subcommittee of the planning board anyway, just kind of pull the decision-making process back to the planning board again.
Okay.
Just for the duration of the rest of this project, which basically will last until the end of this month, with billing ending the end of next month, right?
Correct.
It might spill a little bit over into July, but not too much.
Correct.
So, I mean, presumably, will there be work we have to do as a board outside of meetings?
So this is something that I actually just sent our planning group a question about, because the one real remaining bigger piece of work that is in front of us, which we've all agreed to kind kind of, I'd have to check the notes to make sure we all agreed to this. I think we at least implicitly agreed to put Barrett Planning to work as one last project to pull together.
I'm really sorry. Go ahead.
We were thinking about a couple of, like the inclusionary zoning thing, which may or may not happen at this point, but the big thing we were talking about is Tenny Mountain and having some kind of master plan related PUD-like, planned unit development-like plan for Tenny Mountain. So if they did want to do anything, we wouldn't just kind of fully open up our zoning over there, but more say like you have to come to us with a master plan. And then we can approve that rather than just kind of opening up the zoning in that area. And it seemed like there was consensus. I can't remember from my notes, Joseph, my notes in my brain, that is, at this point, if we had a vote on that or not.
It's a good question. I'd have to check the minutes.
I don't think we
I don't think we had a vote
did
on that.
have a vote.
I mean, it seemed to be like,
We
like,
talked
a,
about
like a
it.
tacit agreement that that might be the best way to go to move forward with Tenny Mountain.
Yep. I know we
But
discussed it. I don't think
yeah.
we voted on, we like came to a final
Yeah.
consensus, but yeah,
but it seemed like most of us were thinking if we did go forward with something at Tenny Mountain, that would probably be the best way to go. And the developers seemed to be okay with that as well.
I would support something along those lines.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, for this evening at least, I mean, so if we agree to pull everything back to the planning board, there might be a decision to make at some point, just to kind of give them guidance officially from the planning board. And we could possibly, if it's even squeak it into a business meeting rather than a work session, just so they have our guidance. Does that sound like a way forward, though, just to round this out for the last month?
You have to see it through. Yeah,
Mhm. Oh,
But see it through as a board.
Yeah.
yeah. Yep.
I just,
Okay.
I'm concerned that we need to comply with the right to know, and, you know, if we're meeting, we need to take minutes and.
Well, no, we'd still, I think we'd just do our business at the planning board
Yeah,
meetings.
okay, that's fine.
I would
Yeah.
agree, John,
Okay,
especially with the attendance
yeah,
issue.
yeah. Should we make that an official motion to pull everything onto the board?
I make a motion that we bring the housing committee to our planning board meetings where the planning board, where they'll have input, but the planning board will make the major decisions going forward for the last part of the term.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Discussion?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Is the Fairgrounds Road proposal, the overlay district, is that included?
We already have the language on that. So as a planning board, we can discuss going forward whether or not we want to, either with revised language or the same language, put that forward again. But as far as the Housing Committee and Barrett Planning Group goes, they have already written the language for us. We can amend that language if we want to change anything, or we can just not move forward with that depending on how the board feels. But that wouldn't be a new thing for them at this point.
The only other thing I'd like to say is that in support of this motion is that while I respect the work that the Housing Committee has done, there's not sufficient participation for them to have a quorum to finish. So I feel like we're kind of obligated to do that.
Yeah.
It's not that we're trying to take power from them, it's that there's not enough decision-making ability left.
Yes.
To be successful, so, but.
The heavy lifting's been done.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And when we should, I think at some point we should recognize them for the work they've done. At
Good
least,
point.
at least make sure it makes it into our report in the town
Okay.
report next year.
All right. So, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. So that motion passes. So it will be, for the rest of the term, it will be coming to the planning board. A few other things of note. So I talked about Tenny Mountain. And I found out as of today from Plan New Hampshire, I think it was, who sent out a message about this, that the new call for applications for the next phase of the HOP grant has just gone live. And so they've posted their guidelines for applications, some of the guidelines for what might be within the scope of work, including some of the broader planning work on regulations that would go along with the housing regulations. So I think the scope is a little bit broader this time around, recognizing that just fixing the housing part might sometimes be insufficient to solve the housing issue. If some of your other regulations more broadly that frame it don't quite work. And so we don't have to decide tonight, but as I think we mentioned at the last meeting, it looks like already existing HOP recipients have a kind of easier path into getting another one to support more work going forward that could help kind of clean up some of our regulations and such.
Great.
And I mean, we could make a motion to look into it tonight, or we can kind of push it back a little bit. There's a benefit of continuity to kind of do this nice and quickly. Although I think we have a lot to think about in the next couple of weeks anyway with this other stuff going on, like the big application. What was the last thing I wanted to say about this? The deadline is sometime in September. I forgot the exact date. I don't know if you remember. But it was sometime in September, but ideally we'd have it in before then, just to kind of keep our work continuous. I don't know what their timeline is for turnaround on applications. I don't know if they know at this point. But anyway, that's what I'd have to say about that. Any questions or comments about that?
It's great.
Is the general consensus probably a good idea to go forward again, or?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. I will also say for other committees, the Lakes Region Planning Commission is having its annual meeting, and I think it's a week and a half. Monday, 17th, so yeah, like a week and a half. They're having their annual meeting. Capital Improvements Program. There's a couple of pieces of this. Sue, do you have any? Oh, not a lot happening right now, I guess?
No, not yet, but I expect most any day.
So a question arises, do you want to continue to serve in this role? This is the time when we would kind of think about if we'd want to shift or kind of continue with the same leadership. And I have no reason to question your leadership. Just kind of putting that out there for your own sanity as well.
I don't mind doing it, but if there's anyone else that would like to do it, that's fine too. I certainly don't mind doing it another year.
If you're available, I think you did a great job last year, and it will be easier this year, having done it last year.
And I believe, and Matt also served on the committee prior to his service on the planning board.
Oh, good. Yep, right.
So the planning board has in the past had one or two members, so up to the board.
I mean, I think it's important to remember that, a lot of the work for the CIP comes from the town staff in generating
It
the
does.
information. And Joseph had, 2 years ago when we started this, Joseph came up with a great idea of, creating a Google sheet where department heads could put their information directly into that, and it works out into a single master page. I do think, if I recall, last year we didn't take enough care to set the capital reserves to equalize the tax rate over the next few years, and I think that's something we need to remember to do. Kind of once we get all the information, there's a step we do at the end where we kind of look at, without any capital reserves in there, you look at the expenditures for each year, and you try to, on years when you're not spending as much, you put money aside for capital reserve, and then on the other years when you have more expenditure, you draw off those capital reserves, so you basically flatline the tax, you flatline the impact of the tax rate. So I think that's something we might not have gotten to last year, but.
Can I also ask a question to either Phil or Sue? In this past year, listening to discussions and updates from the CIP, I felt in the discussion there was a lot of bleed, and to some extent, obviously, but to some extent I wonder if too much or what, between the CIP and the Budget Committee. I mean, the CIP is like kind of subcommittee of the planning board, and they create an advisory document for the budget committee.
Well, for the
And the
select board and the budget committee.
And the budget, and the select,
Yeah.
and the select board.
Right.
And they obviously might have questions back again for the CIP, and it all seemed very blurry hearing about it. And I wonder if that's just the perspective of me sitting here, not being a part of that, or if they became a bit overly blurred in the process.
I think it did get a bit blurred, and I will say that there were a lot of last-minute things with regard to this construction project that made everything blurry, because things were very set, and then things just kind of exploded,
Okay.
in a sense. And I think you're right, because it was blurry to me also, but it was my first year with it, and I was thinking it was me. But the Budget Committee and I feel like the CIP really work very closely together.
Very much so.
But I mean, it's
I think they
important to
just
remember that
overlap.
they are different as well.
They are.
And I just
Agreed.
wonder if there's anything that needs to happen there kind of going forward to make sure, yes, they can collaborate, obviously, which they need to do, but at the
Sure.
same time, they don't just kind of merge into like one entity.
Well, I mean, it is a good idea to have at least one member of the budget committee on the CIP committee, just so that they can provide feedback, but, you know, they should be a member of the committee, not ruling it or dictating how it happens, you know. In theory, the CIP committee should be, you know, a planning board member, you know, a town staff member. You know, some towns actually include the department heads of each town department, but, you know, if we have good support from staff, you know, I don't think that's necessary. That seems to be more effective in small towns.
Exactly,
But
yeah.
yeah. No, I mean, I think it's good. It's good to have someone, you know, Anna Bear was involved the first year. She has a good understanding of the finances of the town.
She
Yeah.
does, and I think the CIP being reborn
Yeah.
that year that you were there,
Yeah.
I think there's just a lot of things that are coming in. I think it's starting to gain momentum again, and
Good.
everyone's getting familiar.
I think once it was available, I think it sounded to me like the select board appreciated it, and it became a useful tool for the select board and budget committee moving forward. And I think Scott Whedon's been supportive as well.
Very much so. Do you have any comment about, because you were involved with both as
I
well?
do, yeah. So I understand that the aspect of maybe a blur between the two committees, but I can't stress enough the importance of the depth of understanding of the CIP committee and the budget committee, because you see one side on one, and then the understanding, and you know,
Obviously, the communication is essential.
yeah, certainly.
It's just that the budget committee doesn't end up steering the CIP committee, or, I mean, obviously, there has to be that
Yeah,
conversation.
delineation between
Um,
the two is important. But I really think, you know, being on both, I was on both of the committees,
Yeah.
and it was the understanding on both sides was
Yeah, okay.
immense. And I'd look forward to serving
Agreed,
on both
yeah.
of those
Okay.
committees.
Was there adequate, it seemed like the first year there was a little bit of confusion about what costs qualify as capital expenses. I mean,
Sorry, Mike.
did that come up last year?
It did, and I think the education of the department heads actually is, you know, looking forward into this year, for the CIP committee,
Yeah.
that we might be able to do some education ahead of time
Right.
before we get in, because we sort of got into it, and please correct me if you feel different, but we sort of got into it about a few months in, and my take was, you know, we might have been better off doing some better educating out of the gate.
That's what I'm wondering, if
Instead
that
of
should be one of the
going
first
into it.
tasks of
Yeah,
the
and I
CIP
think
committee
that's gonna be
is
important.
redefine, you know, these are the parameters of the expenses that we want to identify, you know, and I think some of them are in statute, you know, anyway, yeah. But I mean, I think there's some flexibility there too.
Yeah. No, but I think it'll improve this year more, and one of the things will be educating the department heads with a clearer outline and understanding going into it.
I think, you know, the budget committee and the select board have to deal with operating budgets, but, you know, the CIP items really should be non-operating expenses.
Correct. And we would see some things come in.
Special things that are variable.
Shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
Should be over here.
Right. And that's where, you know,
And the
it
select board can
keeps it cleaner if you don't, like, honestly, I wonder if police cruisers should be in there. If we're in the habit of buying a police cruiser every year, it's a recurring expense. It's not variable, it doesn't need to be in there, right? I mean, that's an argument, although some towns may say, yeah, it's a big expenditure, we want to track it, let's put it in there.
There's another level also in which once the select board is involved, it becomes a more political process, and ideally the CIP should be a less political document.
Oh, I agree. I mean, it really,
This is one of the reasons for keeping them
yeah.
somewhat separate as well.
I mean, it seems like there needs to be some direction from the select board as to, you know, it's not just a wish list where if you think you might want something 5 years out, put it on the list. Like, it needs to be something that's in line with what the town has purchased in the past and has support from the select board to include, you know.
Yeah, it's also, you know, in meeting with some of the department heads, you know, it's like the transfer station, for
Yeah.
example, you know, it meets capacity now. It's like, well, what do you think about, having that conversation, what do you think about in the future?
Right.
Well, geez, you know, you might hear from a department head, well, in the future, if we sort of did this and changed this, that'll help our capacity as it increases. It's like, well, let's start planning on that and, you know, putting some pen to paper and getting some numbers, you know, thought out for that.
The select board's really looking for guidance from the CIP committee and the budget committee. That's what they really want.
All right.
Good.
Excellent.
On to new business. We have a public hearing for our open space residential development subdivision regulation amendment. A lot of words there. So we have our subdivision regulations, and you remember from the zoning amendments we passed this spring, one of those amendments removed our open space residential development OSRD from the zoning ordinance with the goal of putting it into our subdivision regulations, and that has not yet occurred, although we've made some good progress on the language for that change. And so what we have before us tonight is our revised language based upon those discussions. And we also have some minor suggestions from the legal suggestions, and they mostly, or even all, which I guess is open to interpretation, look administrative, nothing really substantive. Again, I think that's probably open to interpretation, but there's nothing incredibly substantive involved in those. So, I mean, what that means is if we agree that those aren't substantive changes, we could, in theory, pass this evening. If we agree with what we see in these amended regulations. And again, we've discussed these a few times at this point, and I believe all the changes that we discussed making have made its way into this document. And so with that, hopefully you've all had a chance to look at it. I see some pages turning now.
It's only a couple of statements legally.
And so, yeah, so the new OSRD, one of the things we noticed is that some of the terms used in the OSRD, Article 9 of our subdivision regulations proposed, some of those terms were not in our definitions. And so we've added some common terms to our regulations as well. And they're up front, and then we go, and that's Article 3. And then we go to Article 9, which is the revised OSRD, which is a little bit streamlined, you see, from the previous one. And some of the confusing tables have also been clarified. I don't remember that some of the tables about setbacks and stuff were a little bit, and buffers and all that were a little bit confusing last time. I think that, in my opinion at least, are much more clear at this point. We will have a public hearing regarding these in a few minutes. Just want to leave it to the board to begin. And if any members of the public are just kind of saying to themselves, what is OSRD? I'd be, I haven't officially opened a public hearing, but anybody want to hear what OSRD is? Yes?
Let them know, John.
So, the quick version, this allows for a developer
Find the acronym first.
open space residential development.
Thank you.
Which I've said a few times already. Well, I mean, actually, the acronym says a bit about it, in fact. In our previous zoning ordinance, it was called OSRD and cluster development.
Interchangeably.
Both, interchangeably, which is a bit confusing. So that's one of the things we clarified in our zoning regulations. But the cluster part also says a bit about this. Basically what it means is if you're a developer and you want to put in a residential development, and whether that be subdividing the property into smaller lots or providing multiple buildings on a single lot, you can determine how many buildings you could put on that lot, and or multiple subdivided lots, and then in return for setting aside permanent open space, you could build more densely and cluster those units together more tightly in return for setting aside open space. And we have a few parameters about what the open space can be and how it has to be defined legally. And there can be agricultural uses and recreational uses and other things on that open space that should be accessible to the residents. And the benefits to the developer are, I mean, obviously it's nice to set aside open space for your residents, but also in terms of costs, you get to have less road build out, less other infrastructure build out, water and sewer build out, to get to more tightly clustered units. And so you can save some money as well by doing so. There are lots of other possible upsides, but that's kind of the main thing we usually talk about. So any thoughts about our revised?
I've missed the past couple working meetings, and we had discussed this with their planning back when we were discussing zoning, and I was optimistic. I'm very happy with what they've come up with, and I think that, you know, with the consideration of the legal review comments, I like this concept. I think one of the main things that jumps out at me is that the density bonus in general seems fairly, so let me read section C5. Density bonus options. The planning board shall have the authority to approve density bonuses in the OSDRD that meets one or more of the following criteria. The density bonuses awarded may be cumulative up to a maximum density bonus of 75% for the development. So, you know, if we're looking at let's say hypothetically we're looking at a 20-acre development with a yield plan that would allow 21 acre lots, just arbitrarily. This would allow for up to 35 smaller lots on that same parcel. That's a big bonus.
Mm-hmm. And we did have a discussion back and forth about how much bonus we want to give.
Right.
And our current regulations offer 100.
Right.
And we talked about 50 at some point, which is not uncommon.
Right. But with
And-
individual bonuses of up to 30% each.
Not to exceed 75.
Right.
Right, so they can get 60% with 2 of the 3 criteria.
Right. But it could be up to 30. I mean, we could still limit it to 50 and say up to 2 and say you could get a 30% bonus for one and a 20% bonus for another, and you're done at 50. Like, you could do that. I don't know that it's a real disincentive.
I mean, I guess one of the pluses of this, So I mean, your concern is overdensity in some of these developments, maybe.
My concern is that we've already changed the zoning so that the minimum lot sizes has already gone down significantly.
Mhm.
So we haven't yet seen any developments where we're combining both smaller lot sizes and open space residential development. I mean, this is a significant variation from what has been done in town over the past 10 or 20 years.
And I see what Phil's talking
Yes.
about, because if it's keeping open space, but then we add all these extra units, it kind of takes up the space.
Well, it doesn't take up the
No, it
space,
can't
because you're
take up
still
the space.
preserving the open space, but you're just getting a lot more density in the developed part of the lot.
Well, this also might speak to some of your concerns about, like, you were talking about, like, building size and such.
Yeah.
I guess that was our housing committee meeting. And, this is one way where you really could provide for, someone making smaller, tighter buildings that would be more affordable.
It is, yeah, it is.
So it might be a way of achieving that affordability that you were talking about.
I'm not opposed.
I'm
I just question the 75%, but
I'm bringing it up for discussion. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, I certainly don't want to say, I'm not against it. I just want to make sure that everybody's on the same page.
I mean, I guess one of the concerns is, I don't know if it's a concern, but previously, with the 100% bonus, there weren't a whole lot of takers.
Right, right.
And,
there were none, were there?
there's the one we're looking at right now with the sidewalks. The farm there, on Crescent Street.
Blackies.
And I believe a couple of really small ones used it. A couple of really small ones used the ordinance.
Yeah, so it was used, a prior version of it was used for River Ridge, an older iteration in like 1987 was used to develop River Ridge, but that was substantially different than.
That was the previous one. Okay.
Yeah, so then there was, theoretically, Martin Estates was approved as an open space
That's the one I was
residential,
thinking of,
but
yeah.
it's not 100% clear to me why they went that route. They do have slightly lower frontage, but the lots are actually all compliant anyway. There are no lots that are sub 1 acre out there, so I don't know the history of that particular decision, but I do know that, it's been used.
And I think the long and short of it, though, is we have really one substantial one that has actually used this, and one kind of used it. And that's with a 100% bonus. So my only reticence of making it less of a bonus is that we're not even using it as it is. And it is a good way to get some more developed land and conserved open space at the same time.
It is in the 30. I think why I'm fine with the 75% maximum is because you need to achieve all three to get to that 30%. And one of those three criteria is the public access one, which is historically different than OSRDs now. You commonly don't see actual public access on an OSRD other than the inhabitants. And that comes with criteria of putting in a public parking lot for that access, So I do see some larger hurdles to get to that. Larger, if you were to do that maximum where you could get to 75%. And I think that's nice that, it was included there for the public access, that you are required to put in parking for the public. So there aren't vehicles lined up in someone's community on the outskirts.
So I'm just doing some math in my head. The parcel that we were visiting tonight is a 40-acre parcel. They subdivided 4 acres off of it. There's 36 acres there. It has agricultural land and a historic structure. If they agreed to preserve that house and keep the open space in hayfield, they could put 60 houses.
60%.
They
They'd
could
have the 60%, correct?
It would be 60%, but 60% of 36, let's assume 1 acre minimum lot size in the egg zone. They could put 60 houses in a cluster development on the rest of that parcel.
And you know what?
I mean, I just want to throw some numbers out there. Like, that's a lot of, and that's in the ag zone with 1 acre minimum lot sizes.
And if they can make that work with,
That's
it
reality.
would be small houses.
Yeah,
That would be probably affordable,
yeah.
and, you know,
I just want to throw some numbers out there. Like, we all saw that parcel tonight, and we had that nice, it's a beautiful hayfield, but like, they could preserve hayfield as an agricultural resource. They could preserve the historical building. And those are two different density bonuses. And it might be a really nice development. I mean, I'm okay. I'm not sure that's a bad thing. It's just a lot, and 60 houses in that area would certainly add to the traffic, but.
They have to add to a lot.
But I mean, you know, let's say there was a parcel like that wasn't on that road where there's a traffic issue. Like, I don't see that that's all bad.
I mean, I see the concern there.
Yeah, right.
It's not typically what we
It's
see
a lot
in
of
Plymouth.
density bonus.
At the same time, I've heard like a whole bunch of people at some of our community meetings
Yeah.
and even on some of our committees and boards, like talking about like tiny homes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
If you do this not as a subdivision, but as a cluster, that's basically what you'd end up with.
I mean, there's a cool development down in Peterborough where it's you drive in and park and you walk to your home because there's no roads through the neighborhood, the New Benusset neighborhood. So like,
And those are becoming more popular.
yeah, it is really cool, and like, it's a planned development. It was built that way intentionally, and everybody who lives there bought there knowing that they were going to have to park in a parking lot and walk to their house. But you know, they like it. It's,
For a lot of people, it's desirable.
yeah.
And for some people, it's not.
And I mean, in a situation like this, you know, with 8 acre lots, 5,000 square foot lots, potentially, I mean, you might not have room for parking, and you might see a development where there are 8 acre lots to get 60 units on this parcel. So it's a lot to think about. You know, with the changes, the minimum lot sizes that were already approved this year, the density bonuses are big.
And to accomplish that level of density, you'd probably have to do it somewhere where we have water and sewer.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
And
Yeah.
so, which means we would also be potentially creating the housing that we need and putting it in places that could support that density.
By definition of the fact that it has to be on water and sewer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or I mean, you can build a community, like, I've seen clusters with a community well and a community septic too. You know.
And it would be a
you-
tough call on that, but yeah.
You can do those. I mean, if you do a community well, it has to have enough volume and it has to be licensed as a public water supply, so it's not quite the same as a private well. There's the higher testing requirements, and you can basically have a large wastewater treatment facility or large septic system that kind of serves multiple homes too, but there's a lot of engineering
So,
that goes into this.
are we comfortable or not? I mean, we're gonna open this up to the public in a moment as well.
Right.
With 75%. I mean, I could see reasons for and against.
I mean, the number of places where somebody could stack density bonuses is gonna be rare. So, you know, on one hand, I don't see.
And they still have to meet
Yeah.
the water and sewer requirements.
Right.
Or somehow deal with septic. Yeah.
I just have concerns with the impact that it does to the rest of the town,
Yeah.
i.e. the schools, the fire department, the police department, all of that stuff,
Shouldn't
you
affect
know.
the schools, but it does.
You know it will. Until that's resolved. I mean, that's a lot.
I will say that there are 2 court cases this year where the courts found that the state should be funding adequate education differently, and
People are working
it
on
should be
it,
less of an
but
issue.
that's a
Let's-
discussion
let's-
for not now. And I agree.
It's a real issue, and when,
It's a
I mean,
huge issue.
It is, and it's not one that this board is
But we
going to.
can't resolve it,
no, I agree, you're right.
but we can help.
I mean, according to workforce housing laws, we have a fair share to meet. According to our housing study, we need more housing. And to build one of these at that density would require smaller lots and smaller houses that could actually be affordable without having to regulate prices and have deed restrictions and all that. And it could be a way of naturally achieving that. And some of like what we really are supposed to do as a community.
Can I correct myself?
Yeah.
I said 5,000 square foot lots in the ag zone, but it's 10,000 square foot in the ag zone, but still,
If you have services.
Yeah.
It's larger, it's
small.
larger if you have no public services, I think, right?
Right.
So I would agree 100% with John.
Yep.
This could be a good tool for Tenny Mountain as well.
Yeah.
And so I'd like to see what the public has to say tonight, and then
I do
there'll be
too.
another public hearing after this one.
Yeah.
So I think we should get the word out as much as we can and get as much feedback as we can.
Should we vote on these amendments first, or on the legal amendments?
I was going to ask about, I don't know if we need to vote or not, but we do need to find, at least in some way, if we're comfortable with them as it's been a long day, what's the word I'm looking for? Substantive changes. And
I believe they are substantive changes.
you believe they are?
I do. Well, waiver.
They're kind of borderline.
Yeah. The first one seems like it's substantive.
You see our
And
confusion in
the one on page 7 seems like we should vote
Yeah,
on those.
I'm not opposed to another hearing on this. I will say, I mean, in the past, it's hard to get people out for like amendments to our regulations as opposed to a zoning
I
amendment.
see what you mean, yeah, because you're worried we have to renotice it.
We will have to renotice it if we change the language.
Okay,
As a
well.
substantive change. But if they are substantive, then that's what it is. I could,
Let me read again.
I mean, some of it's about just referencing the correct thing in our
Yeah.
Yeah.
ordinances.
Yeah,
Like-
I will change my position to say these are clarifications of the original intent.
Yeah, I
And
think
they
they're-
clarify which article to refer to,
Right.
and,
I would say these are not substantive changes.
and request versus waiver is not really a
No, it's
real
a
difference.
clarification of
Yeah.
waiver request, not request.
I agree, clarification.
Yeah, okay.
Which is not to say we can't have another hearing. I
Right.
just know, like in the past, it's hard to get people out when it's not a zoning amendment, when we're just changing our regulations. Even if they are significant changes to our regulations, it's just hard to get people here.
Yeah.
Um,
We have the public, we should enter.
So, are we ready
Do
for?
it, yeah.
So it is 7:24, and I will open a public hearing. Does anybody have any comments or questions about the open space regulation, residential development regulations? Sorry.
Molly McCann. This is about these articles and also a very general question. In these articles, is there any power or opportunity, or does it make any sense to talk about the character, aesthetic, and quality of the architecture of the houses? Because you've mentioned tiny homes and you've mentioned house size and the lot size and all that stuff. But in terms of actual
Design standards.
design standards,
I don't believe we can do too much with that in subdivision regulations, is that correct?
Yeah, correct.
Kind
So
of, or-
you can apply, well, so if someone did an open space residential development with dwelling units that were like condominiums of 3 or more, for example, then that would be subject to site plan review and, certainly design. There is
And there we
nothing-
do have design regulations, or design guidelines.
There's nothing currently in subdivision that regulates architectural character. Often that would be achieved through like maybe a historical overlay or through some sort of form-based zoning. I'm not aware of.
And generally, and you can't apply site plan regulations to single-family or duplexes.
Correct.
And site plan regulations is where the design guidelines would be.
Okay.
Well, if we have design guidelines in the site plan review regulations, then we could put them in our subdivision regulations, because they're both documents that are authorized exclusively by this board.
But I think in this case,
We're not proposing.
they wouldn't, they can't by law impact single and duplexes.
Right.
And anything larger is, I think, still subject to site plan regulation anyway. So I think in practice, it wouldn't change,
Okay.
if I'm reading this correctly.
But there are,
Yes.
there
Is
are
that
things like historical district overlays where
Yeah.
Which we don't-
they can appeal to, I'm not supporting that, I'm just saying that there are towns where houses have to be white and have to have wood windows and
Right.
all that stuff.
Right.
Which Plymouth does not have. I
No.
mean,
There's another code, form-based code
It's also form-based code,
form-based code is something that we,
which also would have to
Don't
be
have.
applied to site plan review, which wouldn't really go through a single-family house. Or apply to a single-family house.
Why doesn't it apply to single-family homes?
This is somewhere in our state regulations, is this correct?
Yeah, state statute specifies that site plan review is applicable to, can be applied to developments other than single-family or two-family dwellings.
And unless it's an historic district or overlay or something, with the commission and all that,
Correct.
there's no way of having design guidelines really for a single-family house, I do not believe.
Correct. There are some towns that have architectural overlays, design review committees, things like that, that typically are tied to a zoning, a zoning provision. So you can do some things with like stepping back a setback to achieve a certain type of roof pitch. So there are certain tools you could use that would impact single-family homes, but by statute, site plan review can't really be one that's applied to single families or two families.
It's kind of a question of how many people are building in some ways. Like in a subdivision, you have one builder of many homes versus.
Or the-
But in this case, it's the type of home which really dictates
Yeah.
whether or not it's covered or not.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good questions.
Yes? Come on up.
Elaine Belkis, Beach Hill Road. Any criteria for the open space?
There are criteria for the open space.
And the only
And if
reason
you,
why
and
I
if you, and if you want to take an extra copy, by the way, you're more than welcome
Oh,
to do so.
okay.
Can you
The
read
only
that?
reason why I ask is years ago, my husband had a condo that had permanent open space, but we couldn't get to it because the slope was so steep.
Well, and accessibility, I believe somewhere in here, is one of the criteria, site criteria. Oh, actually. Do you have this more quickly at your brain, Joseph, or anyone?
Double check here.
so like non-buildable area can't be,
Yeah, and
which is page 4 at the bottom.
accessibility.
So page 9 is where the common open space provisions start.
Oh, there it is, okay, thank you. Generally, open space shall be usable for recreation and integrated into the layout and design of the subdivision to the maximum extent possible. Each dwelling unit in the OSRD will have direct access to common open space. The location and configuration of the open space shall be at the discretion of the planning board.
Oh, okay, that covers it right
And-
there.
So, for example, we're currently considering the other, like, large OSRD that's currently in town, and talking about the sidewalks, one of the questions that has come up is, like, do those sidewalks, for example, actually extend to the open space? And it turns out they don't. But the spirit of this is that they should. And I believe the way it's written, like, having access to it here from every unit and all that,
Okay,
you should have access. It shouldn't be just an open space that nobody can get to.
okay, thank you.
That's a good question, though, thank you.
Whose is this?
You can
You
keep
can,
it.
you can keep it if you
Yeah, you
like.
can keep that.
Some nighttime reading.
Miller. I got a couple of questions. These definitions for the wetlands, is this an upgrade from the state, or is this something that's going to be unique to the open space?
Can you refer to a paragraph or?
The definition of
Oh, is the definitions part? Okay, yeah.
the wetlands, and I don't know if that's something that we're including in our ordinance that reflects the new definition from the state, or is that something that's unique to this development process?
I think it's a good question. We've had less discussion with the definitions because we decided at one of our previous meetings that we needed some of these definitions. And I don't actually fully know the reason for that change. You know, Joseph?
I think Neil made a comment in one of our previous discussions about it, asking for a particular change, and I believe, I assume that's what this change was made in response to, because it does now reference RSA, whereas I believe before it didn't reference the state statute, but so it shows the current definition of wetlands that we have in our subdivision regulations, which do not have any state statutory reference, but the new proposed definition does reference the statutory definition and any future changes to that statute. So I believe it was in response to Neil's
Okay.
comment.
That makes sense, yeah.
I
I forgot about that discussion.
I'm reading the RSA right now, and it's verbatim what the revised definition is.
Okay.
Okay. Next question is, under the homeowners association, is that be a requirement? And what's the difference between a homeowners association and a condominium association agreement?
Well, the requirement there is that if you have common open space,
Right,
that belongs to everyone,
okay,
there needs to be some way of managing that cooperatively.
all right.
This is why OSRDs typically have some kind of association to manage the common open space and access to the common open space.
And finally, then, the approval process would indicate that this plot, this piece of land would not be open to further mother-in-law apartments or other structures that can be done without permit?
Question.
I believe it is anything that's allowed in the zone is allowed in the OSRD, but on the other hand, you'd still have to meet setbacks, which might be tighter. And if there was a homeowners association or a condo association, they might have their own rules about this as well that might prohibit this.
And, okay, and finally, I think we need to talk about the word character versus style. If we're talking about structures, you want to talk style, because we could have several of these units, open space development, that have different style of structures. So if you get into definitions, using a dictionary, and you're using a word picture of the real estate industry, it's all about the style. You're going in there to look for a single floor ranch style house. You don't go in there and say, I'm looking for a really good character house. And we're not really interested in the character of the occupants of the house. We're talking about specifics of qualifying and getting a certification of a structure by numbers, which deals with definitions of style. And so this is part of the confusing part of actually trying to get people interested in developing these, because some of that becomes a moving target, and you trying to qualify your plan. There's federal standards, definitions for housing, there's states definitions for housing. You have 5 agencies that have their specific definitions of different styles of housing, and trying to comply with those is obviously, if you're taking money from the state housing development or the federal, you're going to be using their specification of styles versus what we might have in our municipal ordinance.
I think there's two parts, at least as I understand it, to an answer to this. One is that indeed, and Barrett Planning has pointed this out, we do use the term character, and it's not very well defined, and it should be better defined. And B, to kind of circle back to our previous discussion, I think we are looking more for community character than style of houses. Again, coming back to what we can regulate and what we can't through this kind of ordinance. And we can have a say about community character, which might need to be better defined more broadly, not just in this document, but somewhere else. But in terms of style of houses, we can't really say, well, you need to build like a ranch house versus, whatever.
Can I ask what,
Yeah.
what section refers to character versus style?
Well, I'm just in all these hearings we've had on our housing
Yeah.
studies, is we use the word character versus the style. And if you take our Main Street, our style of our Main Street structures is early American whatever. It's got a mixture of everything, and the design of the house or the building doesn't necessarily reflect its use or occupation. And a good example is 35 Main Street. Looks like a single-family house, but it's a business.
Well, you can talk about this building, it's Richardsonian Romanesque.
And so,
But you can't really dictate in our regulations that you can or have to build in Richardsonian Romanesque.
what I'm saying is, so but as far as the application, is having some, we were talking about architectural design criteria. And that would be that, A, if I came to you with a plan to develop 20 acres, and I'm gonna have one of every type of house that's on the market, just to get, so people could pick one, that would be a mixed style community. And just listening to people discuss their sensitivity to the style or the look of a structure in a single-family home, this is why we don't have manufactured housing or mobile homes, because the style is not contiguous with the other homes that are around it. I'm just thinking that, listening to all of the previous discussions, that those words, character versus style, needs some technical review, and that may help the people, the citizens, to understand this ordinance revision.
Well, I think the word character is on our radar, and we've mentioned this briefly with Barrett Planning already, as something to look, not in the OSRD, but more broadly in our regulations.
Okay, thank you.
So
Bill, did you have-
the only thing I'll say in response is, I think keeping in mind that these regulations dictate how land is subdivided, that land may be transferred multiple times before anyone chooses to put a house up. So, I mean, it may be that a developer is going to subdivide land and build houses to sell, or it may be that a developer is simply going to sell building lots. And in the latter situation, there's very little, the style of the homes to be built is going to be dictated by the building permit application that's filed by the owner.
And not our subdivision regulations.
Right. Yeah, I mean, so we have to remember that these are subdivision regulations that deal exclusively with creation of new parcels, not construction thereon.
New parcels or multiple buildings on a single parcel.
Right.
Scott Robotham, Fairgrounds Road. Just a quick question on the OSRD. When you throw around the numbers like 100, 75, 50, can you help easily explain that a little bit better? It's kind of a long day and I'm having a hard time understanding of it a little bit. So be helpful. Thanks.
You mean,
You talked about the density bonuses.
Yeah, when you're referring, right now you're debating the 75, number 75. So
That one, Phil?
sorry, yeah, so if you look in section, you're welcome to grab one of these if you don't have one already, but
This copy right here.
what I was speaking of is section C5 on page 5, the density bonus options. So, what this is saying basically is that if you can comply with 5A or 5B or 5C, you would get an additional, a developer could bring, so the concept is that when you have a parent parcel, there generally is a yield plan which would show how many lots you could get onto that parcel under conventional zoning, which is why I threw out an example earlier. If you've got a 20-acre parcel, let's say it's all developable, you can get, you're going to have, let's say you're going to have, it's a 25-acre parcel, and you're going to have a little bit of road space and a little bit of space for, but basically you can get, 20 1-acre lots with a little bit of other stuff in there. So your yield plan would allow for 20 lots. These density bonuses would allow you to do an additional 30% for each one of those criteria that you meet with treatment of public access to the open space or protecting agriculturally valuable lands or protecting historically significant buildings and landscapes, that type of thing. So a developer could propose, up to an additional 75% number of lots. So, if you had 20.
For the entire development.
Right. So let's say somebody had hit all three of those, they would have 30% for each, but it would max out at 75% density bonus for the number of lots they could propose on that 25-acre parcel.
And this gives the benefit to the public of most of these things are seen as a public good. So if the developer can provide that public good, we provide them with a density bonus.
Right.
Okay, so that 25 acre parcel that originally had the 20 lots would
Yeah.
now be more than 20?
Yeah, so you could feasibly, if somebody hit all three, they could get a 75% density bonus, which would allow them to have 75% of 20 is 15. So you add that to the 20, you could have up to 35 parcels on that 25-acre lot. Remember, these would be smaller parcels that would have to reserve some open space as well.
I'm just concerned that when you make them that small, buildings are going to get closer.
Oh, absolutely.
And this is one of the benefits
That's
to
very
the developer as well, though, that to put them closer together on smaller lots, you have less infrastructure to build out, which is a major cost of building a subdivision.
And remember, this is not a requirement.
Yeah, this is an optional thing.
This is an option that a developer has if they want to have this smaller parcels with, maybe they have a community park. You drive into a community parking lot and you walk to your house, and you can have 10,000 square foot lots or something like that.
And rather than only being able to walk to other people's lots, you can walk to a common open space as well.
There might be a big park in the middle or something like that. You could have a park in the middle with houses all around it, and you walk sidewalks through the park to get to your house, and you leave your car at the gate.
Or, like more traditionally, you can drive to your house.
Sure.
On a smaller lot.
Yeah, I'm not saying that's the only option. I'm just,
No, yeah.
but I mean, honestly,
It is a great option.
you could have lots as small as 5,000 square feet in the single and multifamily residential zones where,
I'm just a little worried because on my road, there is a development going in that the houses are very close.
Mm-hmm. This is the one on Crescent Street, or?
On Fairgrounds Road.
Is that yeah? So that is a cluster from under the old rules.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you're talking about Crescent Street, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure if it's actually Crescent Street, but it's, I don't know the name.
Is it the one where they're currently building the road and putting in their kind of manufactured homes next to each other?
Like boom, boom.
Yeah.
boom.
Yeah.
That's that one.
That's Crescent
Pretty
Street.
much it. That explains it right there.
Yeah, and that's a cluster. So there is an open space associated with that development that they could have developed all the way up the hill with 2-acre house lots or whatever they were going to do, whatever they could fit in there, and they decided let's keep the house lots smaller and provide recreation space for people. Yeah, but that's the general concept of what we're talking about now, and making revisions to how the town permits those.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other further comments? I noticed, is Zoom down?
For 40 minutes.
Oh, no.
Let's see.
I just glanced over there. I was like, is anybody on Zoom? But
Right.
no, they're not.
Other public comment?
Other comments? All right, so, yes.
Everybody's saying affordable.
Thank you.
Hearing affordable housing. What is affordable housing, Joan Randlett?
Um,
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, it's a good question. It's a good and complicated question. Because there are technical definitions of what is affordable housing. In fact, there are overlapping technical definitions, and then there's a kind of more, just affordability in general. Typically, we define affordable as 30% or less of your income is devoted towards housing. And I know there is some fine print in that as well, but generally speaking. However, there's also, it obviously gets thrown around a lot because we could talk about like someone who has an income of $10 million and like what's affordable to them. So we often also talk about other thresholds as well, and there are other words to better define those other thresholds than affordable. Although that term, for those of us in the housing committee who study these endlessly, how these terms are used and misused and used colloquially versus technically. But technically speaking, affordability tends to be 30%, for ownership at least, for paying your mortgage and associated bills, 30% of your income. I think the way we've been using it this evening is a little bit looser, referring to something more akin to what is legally workforce housing probably, which is affordable to someone with median income or lower, so like basically half of us. And we're basically, I mean, basically, if we, the long and short of it is, leaving the technical parts out, there are lots of people looking for homes who can't get one right now. There are lots of homes that are in the current market and for the foreseeable future at this point, nobody having a crystal ball, way out of the price range for most of us, in fact. And by providing smaller lot sizes, smaller buildings, and some of these other options, some of those costs can come down naturally without putting deed restrictions and such. And one of the goals of the housing committee is to kind of find some ways to make more units, or not make them, we don't have a housing authority, but to like promote the creation for developers of more units that people can actually afford who aren't wealthy. People who want to live and work in this town, work at the university, whatever they want to do, have more units for people to be here.
The reason I ask this is I've had people come to me, calling me this last week, looking for a rental.
Mm-hmm.
And when I tell them that mine is $1,200 with all utilities, they're saying, well, I work, this is a 40-year-old with 2 jobs, and she can't afford it.
And
I think Mike can attest to that, too. Yeah.
That is a failing of our economic system in general,
Yeah.
not housing prices.
But, Joan, can I clarify maybe your question? It's not going to prevent someone who's making a lot of money from buying. It's not going to prevent them from buying. So it's not an income-based system. Could still buy that inexpensive home.
Yes.
Okay.
It is not a deed restriction or any of this sort of stuff.
And I think you mentioned a natural way
Yeah.
to find lower price points for anybody to be able to buy, a wider range of people to be able to afford it.
What do you mean by a natural way? That's my main question.
A way without putting a restriction on the deed to the house, a way that doesn't put income caps and that sort of thing in place, a way that you don't,
Market-based.
yeah, you still are following market rates, and finding ways within market rates, which is really hard today, to actually provide for greater affordability. And it is really hard in the current market to do that.
We find ways with smaller homes, smaller lots, that it's a trade-off for that lower price.
I will say that if you read the RSA on workforce housing, there is language in there that asks or requires developers to provide for continued affordability of units that they propose in a workforce housing development. So like, it's up to them as to how do they do that,
But there's also naturally occurring workforce housing.
Yeah, there is.
A lot of vague language in the
Yeah.
workforce housing.
It has good intention. I mean, yeah.
And some of it's productively vague, but, anyway, it's also how you get a bill passed. So, any other public comments, questions?
Are we gonna continue this to our next one?
Well, let's see how the board feels. How do we as a board feel about this? Are we ready to adopt this and not have not that anybody's rushing in for an OSRD right now, but currently in our regulations, we don't have an OSRD, even though our zoning ordinance says we do. Just look in the subdivision regulations, we haven't adopted that yet.
Are we bound to have another hearing or no?
I don't know. I mean, how do we feel?
We don't have to, but I think we should.
I have one question about the document.
Yeah.
I love how it's written, very non-biased. I do have just one question on page 10. Page 10, letter E, subsection 2, where we give examples of nonprofits, and we have 2 in there. The Pemmy Baker Land Trust or Lakes Region Conservation Trust. Is that appropriate that we're even giving examples of organizations?
It's not uncommon, I believe.
Okay.
There are only so many of those around.
Right, and I'm just thinking 20 years down the road, if one of these entities were to change names or, you know, it's the one thing where we specify something and just want to bounce it off everyone and see what it is.
I interpret that as an example of, not a requirement to use one of those two.
The such as language.
But the fact that you bring it up, maybe we should reevaluate the language and say an example of such organization would be.
I mean, I think such as covers that.
Okay.
And I think they were listed as opposed to just saying use a nonprofit organization.
I just don't want to see this be interpreted down the road as we're steering.
Right.
And like I said, very minute, but I don't know if it's something we
Good point,
should
Matt.
kick around.
I don't think it's minute. I think that could be a monster.
To take it out or
No, I think
to leave it
to
in?
leave it in.
I don't think it's uncommon, and I don't think it causes. Joseph, do you have any insight?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I'm
You
sure they
know, it was
would've
one of the
picked up
ones
on it on
that
the
Barrett
legal
included
side.
in their recommended draft. I'm not sure.
Well, we could modify it to say such as a land trust or a conservation trust.
Just to give examples.
And remove a specific name.
I think that's more appropriate.
They're
examples,
I'm
but-
trying to think, is this and I know wasn't on
And
our tent, Barrett's tent,
And I
but
would
could
say
it be
those are
construed
definitely
steering?
administrative or those are administrative changes, which
Yeah, I would say administrative.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. Okay.
honestly,
That wouldn't require a renotice.
no, I don't think so.
But I think that's a great point, Matt. And I think we need to make it more of a general
I was.
rather
Yeah,
than a
general, like
specific.
land
I was
trust or
going to-
If we're
conservation.
overrun with land trusts in the next 20 years, I would be ecstatic, but I don't think that's gonna happen.
Well, then they can pick their own.
I was going to suggest looking at the model ordinance from the state. I don't know if you're able to pull it up really fast and
check, yeah.
find it.
Yep.
Well, the hard part is actually finding this section of it.
Right.
Because there's the innovative land use, what's it called?
The Innovative Land Use Planning Techniques Handbook.
That's the one, yeah.
Yep.
And they have model ordinances in there.
Yeah, let me get back to you on that.
I suspect that this might have been an addition, but
I know we also based some of this off of Dover, I believe, certain parts of it.
Correct.
I think that's, making it more general is
Yeah.
probably more
And
appropriate.
that would be administrative if we just did such as a land trust or a conservation trust. That'd just be administrative at that point. We wouldn't
It would be
have to
very easy to find local examples of those things. And that might change. I mean,
You're right.
sometimes organizations rebrand, they change their legal names.
Well, that's it, and you just.
Or does the
Yep.
Coney area land trust say, hey, why wasn't our name put in there?
The habitat that's in our backyard is trying to do it right now.
All right, so are we feeling then?
I'm gonna make a bold motion.
Okay, I was just gonna ask, okay.
You still open your public hearing, so.
Here we are.
I would like to amend our subdivision regulations with Articles 3, with the definitions included in Article 3 and Article 9 to add open space residential development as proposed to our existing subdivision regulations. In support of my motion, I will say that if we don't like this, we can change it in the future. This is not a change this is not a process that requires town approval. We can always decide to change this down the road if we
Anytime
don't
you
like it.
want.
Can you restate that?
My motion is to adopt and add the proposed changes to our subdivision regulations
Including the trust thing?
with the,
So that's not very articulated, maybe.
so I will amend my motion to say that we should include the legal comments presented. So there were 1, 2, 3 comments suggesting edits to the language to comply with our attorney's recommendations. And the other would be to change the language on page 10, striking under 10E 2, change by a private nonprofit organization such as a land trust or a conservation trust, which has in its purpose the preservation to open space. That is my amended motion.
So that's the motion to adopt.
Yes.
Second.
Okay. Is there any further discussion? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, the motion passes, and this is adopted. Thank you all very much for the hard work.
Let's thank Barrett Planning.
And thank you,
too.
Barrett Planning, as well. And I guess it would be good to get a new copy after this of the subdivision regulations,
Yes, so,
This is the first time they've been amended in like 20 years,
since
isn't it?
2002, yes,
which I was
that's
just gonna
correct.
say, and
2 years.
and it would be a good idea going forward to also look at some further amendments to our subdivision regulations, which seem woefully out of date in some ways.
Yeah, one note that I will make, having looked at these for this process for the future that would be good to consider, is that some of the numbering has really kind of, in 2002, there are actually 2 Article 8s I discovered, in which they have been since 2002, so.
That's an administrative change. Can
That
you
is.
clean it up and present us a clean copy?
I was just gonna say that, actually, yes.
Sorry, I didn't mean to
No,
preempt
no,
you.
as long as it gets done, I'll be happy.
Yeah.
So I will also, it will need a signature by the majority of the planning board, and then we'll need to certify that signed copy with the town clerk. We'll also need to share a copy with the State Office of Planning and Development. So I will plug these in, and the 3 attorney comments, the original amendment, and then the change made tonight, and I will have a copy available for the board to sign.
Wasn't there some change that Rebecca was hounding us that we were supposed to put in?
There is, and we're still unclear about exactly what that is, and maybe I'll write myself a note to follow up with her again about what that is, unless you want to, Joseph, either way.
I mean, it sounds like it was an administrative change, but if we're redoing these, let's incorporate that.
I think it may, it might be more than an administrative change. We'll have to
Yeah.
see exactly what it is.
I did chat with the town's attorney about her comments on that, and he was not sure. So we'd have to, I think, talk to,
Okay.
I
hear
think
from
this was part
Rebecca.
of the
So may-
court
so-
case, I believe.
Yeah.
Related back to that.
That's what
We
she
need to
said.
hear more from Rebecca about what the details of that were.
Yeah. All right, well, thank you all. Unfinished other business from board members and planning staff. Any updates on the ZBA?
We have Kevin French.
I do have I'll give that to you real quick because I we have someone waiting here for other business. But I do have an update from the zoning board, and they have made 2 offers, or one offer that's their first choice and one offer that's their second choice.
Okay.
So their first suggestion is the zoning board has a regularly scheduled meeting on July 2nd at 7 p.m., which is their regularly scheduled July meeting. They do have at least one hearing on that agenda, though they have noted that since the planning board has a more intensive meeting schedule lately, they would also be willing to come to the planning board's July 11th work session, because the July, just a note, the July work session would have fallen on Independence Day, so it is now on the 11th, or when we made the schedule originally, it got bumped back to the following week, so the July 11th work session is the planning board's next.
Well, so my concern here, if we do it on the 11th, we can put the ZBA joint session right up front and not waste anyone's time. And then we can break the joint session, do whatever other work we need to do.
Does that conflict with the Energy Committee?
If, can I just finish my
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
if we do it on the 2nd at the ZBA meeting, unless we have a fixed time for the dual session and then do the hearing afterwards, we'll be waiting for whenever the ZBA is done with their hearing before we get to have a dual session, and we'll just be kind of sitting around twiddling our thumbs, which maybe it's good that we all see a ZBA hearing. But and for the sake of not like making anyone wait on their side or our side, I think it would be easier to do it at our meeting during a work session where we're not going to have a public hearing that's going to be who knows how long.
Typically, we take that meeting off, and I would propose we do it the first, our work session in August. That whole week, a lot of people take vacation.
I'm going to be out of town.
And I think the last couple of years we actually took off in August and not July.
Do
We
both.
could.
First 2 weeks of July.
You are?
Well, other
That's
thoughts?
when everybody I know takes
Yeah.
the first 2
Yeah.
weeks of July.
Can we counteroffer to the, so I think there is a conflict with, so our meeting is going to conflict with I just checked my calendar. I think the Plymouth Energy Committee does meet on the
Correct.
11th, so
Okay.
we're going to have to fight with them for meeting space. But isn't there
Okay.
a room over there that's available?
There is a
No,
room over
not
there that's
anymore.
locked. It's
Oh.
it's now an election room.
Okay, got it.
It's a vault.
Okay, sorry.
There used to be.
I would, can we counter and offer the work meeting in August?
Let's see, why not?
It sounds like,
Do we still have to have the meeting in July? Oh,
Well, it sounds like we might not anyway if we don't have space.
well, I don't know.
Yeah, it is scheduled on the same day as the Energy Commission meeting, so it would be a situation where one of the two boards would have to find a
My
different
only,
space.
actually, my one concern about, I mean, perhaps we can do this at our business meeting. If there are any decisions that need to be made for the housing work,
Yeah,
Um,
that's true.
if that's come back to the board now, we could possibly squeeze it in if it's nothing, as long as we're quick about it, into our business meeting.
I think we should.
I know it's gonna be a long hearing.
I think we should. I
but,
mean, don't we have to do it by the end of the month?
So we can
anyway?
ask Barrett Planning to have anything we need to make a decision on by our next business meeting? That might be too quick of a turnaround for them, but at least if they need any guidance from us, let's say, they can have questions that need guidance by our next business meeting,
Third Thursday.
third Thursday of the 20th, or whatever it is. And then, because it's getting kind of late anyway for that cycle to do on the 11th. So we need to touch base with them anyway, Barrett Planning. And so, I mean, I don't see at this moment why not to do that, to cancel the July meeting.
The
Anybody?
First Thursday. Or the second.
Well, the second at this point, but
First
yeah.
meeting of the month.
Yeah.
Yep, good idea.
Yep. So
Okay.
it's moved to August.
Okay, so let's aim for August at, I guess, our meeting time.
At our standard work meeting.
Yeah.
First Thursday.
Sounds good. That's August 1st, so.
Okay.
Would it be August 1st?
Yep.
I mean, I'm supposed to be here anyway, but.
Unless there's interest to wait till September.
August 1st, yeah. Well, for now, let's tentatively think August. And at some point, we should also touch base with, which might also wait till the end, and we could talk about it at some point before then, to the end of the summer, the ESZ and talking to the Conservation Commission, and
I'd
maybe.
like to get their input.
Yeah, and whether that be the entire Conservation Commission, or Joan Turley, or,
Let's invite the whole,
yeah.
Sure.
All right. So, in other business, I believe we have a guest this evening?
Yep, let's wait, make sure, let the land planner address me. I'm Alan Barnett, land surveyor. Some of you know me. After listening to, yeah, right, stop laughing. I need to see you tomorrow.
Oh.
So don't laugh at me. But anyways, after listening to all this and about, I have a 100-acre lot, we can't get a building permit on. And if we subdivide it, I can do 175 units, so maybe I've answered my own question. All I want is one house. So what we hear, it's in regard to RSA 674-41. I've talked to Joseph about this. I've had some good discussions on it.
If you can clarify that RSA for either Joseph or yourself about.
Sure.
I'm gonna get some maps to lay out to show.
Sounds good. So RSA 674:41 is a state statute that governs minimum road access requirements for building or development. So broadly speaking, it states that you must have one of a certain type of, at least some of a certain type of road frontage for a lot to be considered buildable. So there's essentially 5 categories of road frontage that the lot can have to be considered road frontage. And indeed, this is superseding local frontage requirements. This is a state statute. So the 5 categories are, in order for a building permit to be issued, a lot must have frontage on a class 5 or better highway, which is a town or state road. It must have frontage on a road shown on a plat approved by the planning board, either a subdivision plat or a street plat. So a subdivision plat road or a street plat road, typically associated with a development. It could be a private road in a subdivision. That's the most common way we think about that one. There's also class 6 roads, which is a completely different situation. The planning board has seen a couple of class 6 roads, and the statute says that those may be built upon subject to a vote from the governing body, select board.
Select board, yeah.
Yep, and with advice and comment from the planning board, provided that the builder record a waiver of municipal liability. The same restriction applies to private roads, but as with class 6 roads, only if the governing body, after review and comment by the planning board, has voted to issue building permits on that particular road or portion thereof, and if the owner has recorded a notice in the registry of deeds acknowledging the town is not liable for maintenance or damage that might occur as a result of use. So that's the same as class 6 roads. So an example would be something like probably Thompson Farm Lane of a private road as it's used in this statute. Class 6 roads, we have plenty of those in town, and the board's weighed in on a couple of class 6 road building permits. And then there's also, which is not really applicable to anything I'm aware of in town, a street shown on a subdivision plat that was approved by the ZBA or governing body before the planning board was granted subdivision jurisdiction. The street must have at least one building on it and have been constructed prior to July of 2004. So that one's not really at issue very much, but the key piece of this is, in order under the statute, to build on a lot, you must have frontage on a Class 5 or better public road, a road shown on a plat approved by the planning board, which can be a subdivision plat or a street plat, which is similar but doesn't show the creation of a new lot, but otherwise is identical to a subdivision plat for all intents and purposes. There's also Class 6 and other private roads, which are subject to the select board approval with planning board comment and a waiver. So that's broad strokes what RSA 674.
And to clarify, this evening then, we're not having a public hearing. This is a kind of informational session.
Conceptual consultation.
Conceptual consult of sorts. It's not really for a particular plan or anything. It's more about what this road is, I suppose. And hearing all this, I can't speak for everyone. I'm feeling like we're not probably going to make any decisions this evening, because it's a whole lot to take in and make a decision about.
Oh, we
can start to
we cannot make, but this is a non-binding meeting.
Well, even if
We can't make decisions.
even to a decision to give advice would be a lot to think about. So all that being said, so you're interested in this road to your.
Well, I'll explain the situation.
Yeah.
I agree with the non-binding consultation. I put that right on this plan. And
Okay.
I understand non-binding, being the Supreme Court on it, so I completely understand it.
Okay.
So, but also, it's, the board needs to have a recommendation to go to the selectmen as well. You do have the ability to make that recommendation tonight if I present evidence to you you feel satisfactory. So
Fair
I'm
enough.
going to leave that open to the board.
I see.
It's the board's decision. I am here, like the discussion with Joseph, the thing we could fall back to is the street plat, which we could come back in. I don't really feel it qualifies for a street plat here. Well, for instance, just to let you know, I got to get you in the right place. The little tax map one, or this one here in front of you too. I have another tax map one right here. The tax map one's good to look at first, because in yellow, the yellow square is actually original lot 3. And you can look at the banner behind you in 1763, okay? This was laid out. This thing's had access since then. And it also has and they confirmed the deeded access into this property in 1977 for width. So the access has existed since 1763.
Can you clarify that? What's the deeded access?
The deeded access was clarified in 1977 through the Bell property to this property, because this property actually has access from the top of Hoyt Hill. That's where we are, right top of the 3 lanes on Hoyt Hill on the
Yep.
west side of the road.
Yep.
And this property has a deeded 50-foot, it had a deeded access for a long time. And they even mentioned it as and they've quantified it as a road, because it serviced more than 3 places even in the 1890s. And so that's where they get into this property. In 1977, they went one step further, because there was not a definition of width. A lot of the old right-of-ways into property or roads did not have widths. So in 1977, the Bell property, which abuts between this and Route 3A Mayhew Turnpike, was defined to be 50 feet wide. They decided to agree it was 50 feet in width. And on this larger plan, that black line there is that it's also shown on both of these other surveys that have been recorded and a matter of record, which should reflect on your tax maps, and it hasn't been updated to that, and it should have definitely reflected on the tax maps, the 50-foot right-of-way since 1977. So that being said, that's the access into this property now. They just want to build one house on this property right now, and would like to get a building permit. So they also bought the 2 lots off of Winterberry Road. The tax cards have been updated on the house, but not on the abutting parcel here. These 2 highlighted in yellow on this plan. They also own, and if you look at the tax map, they highlighted the other 2 as well.
26.5 and 26.6.
Correct. Both of those they purchased as well. They purchased those for other reasons, because of bringing utilities in and something like that to the house. They might want to come that way instead of the other direction. They wanted to have control in this area. The other reason they bought it was when I talked to Joseph, 26 26.6, if you merge that lot with this lot, you'd have frontage on Winterberry Road. And then he says that gives us the ability to use the same right-of-way we want to use up on the other end, because we actually have private road frontage, but we don't have to use it, we can use the other one. And I used the legal term with him, and I said, what's that? What's that legal term? He said, well, if we just merge that, eliminate a lot, have frontage there, and still use the right-of-way I want to use, I said, the proper term is stupid. So that's why.
Say that again?
It's stupid.
Oh.
That's the legal term. I might have mixed that up a little. But anyways, this road, this access that's in here, this is that you see on the map that goes in across the property here.
Across lot 16.
Correct.
Yeah.
I gotta get the name off of the other map here.
No, that's fine.
Because it's a PQROZ Fund LLC. It goes through that one, okay? And I'm actually working for it. I'm gonna give you the name, and I wanna make sure I pronounce it right.
You talk about lot 16,
I believe so, yes.
right here?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and I just want to make sure I get the name correctly. I'm working for the three owners of this is Ning Yu, Nenguyu, and Thomas E. Crossley. They're the owners of the parcels, and that's the client I'm working for. So this road that goes in there right now is it's a great road and great access. They actually use it for logging. They take tractor trailers in and out of there, so there's no problem that way. Plus, you have to sign the liability release waiver anyhow. And this lot's 107 acres. And a few years ago, the prior owner bought this abutting parcel, 20.85, which was also serviced by that, which we made it 3 lots, so it's not a private drive. It actually made it a private road, in my opinion, and it has been since the 1890s to service those 3s that long until he merged it.
Is it subject to gates and bars?
It's subject to gates. It's subject to gates in the deed, but it's not subject to gates and bars in the way you're thinking of a Class 6 road. That's a term for Class 6 roads that started in 1900. When you discontinued a road, and it wasn't completely discontinued, it turned to a Class 6, non-maintained by the town. And then that term, subject to gates and bars, came into play, which is synonymous with Class 6 roads.
I think of it as a private access to get to a back lot.
If you see a road subject to gates and bars now, that's a Class 6 road.
Really?
Yes.
When did that happen?
1900. Yeah. Before my time, but I know I'm looking like from there almost now. But so that's synonymous to a Class 6 road. This one happened to be subject to gates and bars, but that wasn't uncommon too because of the farming and that sort of thing. Of course, that's why it was always subject to gates and bars, for that reason, to keep the animals in. And also, when you discontinue a town road, just to let you know, it doesn't turn into a private road, which Joseph probably will tell you in that same statute, it eliminates you getting a building permit on it.
So can they bring in utilities on that road if it's subject to gates and bars? Because that's kind of a big issue.
The gates and bars doesn't control the utilities. The utilities are usually timed in accordance when it was created. The current owner says no.
That's on that's the Bell property.
The current owner says no, but the attorney says yes, because it was created in 1890. And when things are created in 1890, sometimes they say subject to ingress and egress by foot and by horse and carriage or whatever. That ripens into current technology automatically. So cars, trucks, utilities.
Wires.
What's that?
Wires.
Yes. Well, I say utilities, yes. And because that's also can be cable now, or everything else. When it doesn't is around 1940 they changed that, or 50 is when the case I think really happened, was it needed to be explicitly written in the deed that it is. So it's all time sensitive.
Okay,
So,
interesting.
So that's their other thing. But I mean, they can live off grid up here too. It's beautiful solar and that sort of thing if they want to as well. So again, what I'm here for tonight is we still felt this was a private road because of the way it's serviced and the dates it was in. And if the board feels that, and actually, these were recorded, and this is the ironic thing about the statute that mentions that. We as land surveyors have the right to stamp a map, there's no new ways or streets or ways, and it's stated right on here, I'm paraphrasing it a little, and you record it, and then you're supposed to update your town tax maps. And a copy of these are sent to the town, and the town, if they don't object to it, then it shows that it's a private road or way into the property. And we have that right in the statutes to do that, because this exists by deed and exists by, actually 2 deeds in this situation. So, and that's not mentioned in the language in these things, but of course, this hasn't been challenged, as we know. We don't have a court case that has challenged this, because they also say private road, and then they consider an easement in a street, then they say a street plat after a private road, and in your regs, you don't have definitions that cover that either. Your definition, you have a definition for driveway, which means private vehicular access servicing not more than 2 lots, and then, of course, you have a definition of road, so, I mean, street. So you run into multiple language issues. So either this is acceptable, what's of record, and the time duration it's there, or we come in for a street plat, or you can recommend us right to the selectmen, and the selectmen can decide if they want to grant the building permit in regards to this, because even at that time, if they denied it, then we have the right, or the owner has the right to appeal it to the ZBA. So there's several avenues to go on this. And you don't have to make the decision tonight. You can look it over and think about it. But if we do a street plat, obviously I just want to service the existing lot that's there, and it's already servicing it. So all we do is make a plan showing where it is in the width, which we already have, and ask for any other waivers that you might want, because we already have to sign the liability release form, and it's not a subdivision. So, and then if they ever subdivide it or expand it, they'd be back to you to improve it. So you can see.
All you want is a building permit.
What's that?
All you want is a
All
building
we
permit.
need is a building permit. Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm looking at this and saying, I would love to make this work.
Yep.
And at the same time, this is a lot of information we're just seeing for the first time. Some of it we haven't seen at all yet, like the deeds and such. And a lot of complex regulations that we don't ordinarily deal with, about definitions of various types of roads and access and so forth. And for me at least, before making a recommendation to the select board, I think I'd like to sit on this information a little bit longer and have time to think about it and look at some of the regulations and documents and maps and.
Or we can just say we come back in for a street plat. I mean, you leave all this.
That
and
was
look
going to
at
be
it.
my suggestion. My question is, I don't know if our, I forget, the town I used to live in had a street plat procedure, and the planning board was authorized to sign street plats.
You're authorized to do
By
it.
RSA?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I was wondering. I didn't know if the zoning ordinance had to empower us to do that.
You're correct. It is, so,
It's-
and
it's
you're
in-
correct
it's in
as well. It's
statute.
in statute, so the guidance from New Hampshire Municipal is if you don't have a specific procedure outlined in your subregs for it, to follow your boundary line adjustment process. That's what New Hampshire Municipal.
And also, and the client obviously can ask for waivers, but you have the waiver process in your regulations. So, I mean, there's no reason, because if you're gonna require it to be built up to a certain standard, then you can't ask for a liability waiver release. You see, so the reason to ask for that would be to leave it as is, but we would ask for that as part of the waiver. Because if you do have to improve it, well then, you're almost forced into subdividing it if you follow your street regs. Okay? If you have to build it up to 20-foot travel surface, 4-foot shoulders, you see what I mean?
And what is the process, I mean, I haven't done one of these. What is the process of, like, normally you'd notify abutters, but in this case, we also have this road going across someone's property. And how are they involved in this process?
It's an
And-
existing right of way.
But they would
It's
be
not a road.
notified and have opportunity to
I mean, it's existing right away, assuming all the paperwork's in place and.
you do have
all
to,
of that,
yes,
yeah.
you do have to notify the abutters if you hold a hearing.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. And I know Joseph will correct me, I don't mean to step on your toes here, but you do have to notify the abutters, which of course there are two of them, all
Yeah.
ones down through here, whoever created these. I did that subdivision years ago, so we did all of those and then around over here, Dick Merrill's over there, and the Morse family there. Matter of fact, the Morse family owned this land in Hebron there in Plymouth.
When it was Plymouth.
Since 1780, right.
And I know this would probably end up being more of a civil issue in the long run, but the owners of Lot 16 have you spoken with them?
My client has and their attorney has.
Okay. Are they on board, or?
No, they don't want to use this, but they know they can.
That doesn't
for the
matter.
road.
No, I know, I just,
The only thing.
and again, I know that would be a civil issue eventually, not for us
The only thing
necessarily.
actually, the only thing they're arguing over or discussing is the utilities through there.
Okay.
Not the access.
Okay.
Because the access is been reserved, as you can see on the plan they purchased from here. That's their property.
So it's in their deed too.
It's in their deed by reference of the plan. They did not carry the language to it for some reason. They left it out of the deed.
But it's recorded.
Correct. It's recorded, and when a plan's recorded with a deed and reference, everything on the plan is part of the conveyance. But, yeah, so that's what it is. And honestly, if you want, that's the safest route for you to go, is hold that hearing for the street plat. But the other thing is, what I wanted to ask the board, is that plan, I feel that we could show this plan as a representative, it's already recorded. You could accept this as the street plan, the street plat plan. I mean, I'd hate to have to make another whole survey plan just for that street, when it's already shown.
If we don't have street plat requirements, I would say as long as it complies with the RSA, we would, I mean, we can't tell you that you can't file a street plat application.
Well, I know that, but I
Right.
meant in regards of.
I'm just playing devil's advocate to say, if you brought us a street plat application for the next hearing, like, we would have to consider if we would have to consider whether or not we considered it complete and accept it, and we have a hearing on it.
Obviously, we can't predetermine that tonight.
And I mean, so what I'm recalling now is that we had a woman who was up to date on street plats, and she was the reason that we had a street plat ordinance and standards, is that street plats were required to comply with the road standards in our subdivision regulations, which we don't have here, so you're not.
Well, it says to follow that. I'm the general.
Oh, by default, does it?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so if by default, I mean.
That's why I mentioned waivers, because we're not gonna, for one house.
Right.
You don't, it's not necessary, but I mean.
Would it meet the grade, would it meet the grade requirements? Regardless of width and surface?
I believe so. The only place the grade goes up a little bit is at the end of this. If you look on this has 10-foot topography on it. And you can see it pretty much goes right along the contours. The only place that might be close to being a steeper grade is right when you get to downtown.
Okay,
Yeah.
interesting.
But again, all of that can be asked for as waivers. Well, for one, it's not a subdivision.
It's an existing
We're not
road.
asking waiver for subdivision, we're just asking waiver for the
For a
street
building
plat
permit.
for one place.
Yeah.
Again, if I was asking for a subdivision, I wouldn't even.
But there's nothing to say that a future owner couldn't say, I want to propose a 100-lot subdivision.
What happens then?
Then they, right.
road
You guys are for,
I know,
right?
I know, yeah,
Nothing happens.
true.
Yeah, and now you're getting that special thing, yeah, you know, you have 175 places up here, you're promoting that, and I can't get one place on 107 acres, it just seems ironic, right? So,
Right.
so anyhow, we would be asking for waivers on the road, I just want to make that clear, I don't want to be a surprise to you, if we come back in.
It's
So-
a unique situation.
Well, yeah, well, it's not so unique. I still advise the other towns that have had this issue, that some of them adopt rules and regs with that a private easement or right-of-way can service for, count for, it's just re-termed private road. That's simple as that. If you say that that easement is a private road, you're all set. You gotta remember, 75, 80% of your roads in Plymouth are private easements, even though they're town roads. It's still an easement.
It's the subject to gates and bars that's,
That has nothing, honestly, that has nothing to do with it.
It's not a class 6 road, so it's not
No.
relevant.
No. Again, Class 6 road.
So that's only
Gates
the
and bars
town-owned
is
roads.
synonymous only with Class 6 roads now. I mean, you can look that up. I mean, you don't have to believe me on that, but that's what that is.
And it could really change things if that was adopted where your easement can now be a road. It's going to put a lot of thought on people's minds of giving easements to go through their stuff, to go through the land, if they know it can potentially become a road naturally.
I sympathize, because I know exactly the type of situation we're talking about, and,
Well, it happened a
I
lot
know-
with large pieces of land, and I
Yeah,
know
it was
some,
a-
I know some people around Plymouth have large tracts of land, that's several pieces.
I've got one too.
Right, I know you do. And, so, but that being said, we're more than willing to come in for the street plat, just looking for some guidance in regards to that, and I pretty much hear that, and I know I can ask for waivers. So, which will only be addressed after the application's accepted at a public hearing, but, and the abutters are notified, so. And I think that's a consensus I kind of think I'm hearing, right? So, we'd be glad to do that, but I wanted to get this out in front of you, that these plans are on record and everything. And actually, I'll talk a little more with Joseph over that. I'll try to beat him up a little, which doesn't go anywhere. You know, he's not the biggest guy. He's tough, though, you know. Look at him.
Plymouth is very lucky.
We are.
No, he
We
does
are
a good
indeed.
job. We had some very good discussions, and that's why I'm here tonight in regards to that. We're both on the same page, so nothing's new. So there isn't going to be any surprises between us. And he even mentioned, which I already knew about, I could ask for waivers. He had mentioned that that is allowable, especially under the statute. And actually, I'm sure he could write he'll write a review of the application for the board anyhow, right, when it's submitted.
Yes.
So, but I will go over it with him first, to make sure he doesn't think I'm as crazy as he thinks. All right? Even though I've known Neil forever and friends with him, so that I didn't want that to be held against me, Neil. So, and I'd be glad to leave a set of these tonight for anybody on the board that want to look at them. And
Okay, thank
Joseph,
you.
I know you know pretty much, but you might as well have a set of them so you can also, if you have any other suggestions. Does that sound good to the board?
Okay.
Thank you.
I appreciate your time tonight, and I know you had a long evening and going over a lot of stuff, but I just get a kick out of all those lots. And I can't get a building permit on the original lot in town, so that's how tough the regulations are. They did this so you could come up here and develop land and live on it, and now you can't even build on it.
And it's important to protect all the landowners, and just to make sure.
Interesting.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, man. And Joseph, actually, all this stuff I have, I'll leave you the stat and stuff. Because this has a, right.
Sounds good.
Reading stuff tonight.
We've been over to 5 tonight.
Sorry, thank you. All right, I think you got all of it. Yeah, nice colored oval. Oh, well, I did have another for you. Kevin's survey on that subdivision. Kevin Bridges, yeah. He's young. He's a year older than me, but our license number's only 1 pack now, so. We got him a long time ago. All right,
All right.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Looking at the agenda here,
St. Joseph's Smell.
How long did you work for John?
are there any public comments? Yes?
John Randlett, Plymouth resident again, and when you were talking about the CIP earlier, I mean, I've served on every board in this town except the zoning board, and we need people on these boards that can think independently, because like Neil said, you know, we're looking from CIP, planning board, everything to come together with the town budget and get something that's presentable. And in some instances, you make a decision against what the CIP, has suggested. And you end up with situations where you have to go get bonds and stuff, and it affects the overall budget. So it's very important for people in the town that have complaints to come in and participate in some of these boards, instead of the same people being on every one of them, So just thank you guys for all you do, and get people involved. If you've got a complaint, get involved.
Mention the zoning board, that they have like full board member vacancies.
What?
Correct. Yes, there's one full member spot on the zoning board and 4 alternate spots available. So if anybody has
I heard that.
friends, families,
That boomerang back, didn't it? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll tell you, serving on the planning board is a lot more fun than zoning board.
Keep in mind, if anybody from the planning board is thinking about serving, you'd have to negotiate with Peter, because you can only have one member who is on 2
Yes.
boards. If you have, you can't have, so if one of our alternates were to take a full seat on the ZBA, then we would have 2 members that were concurrently on the planning and zoning board. One of them would have to step down from one of the 2 boards.
Yep.
Isn't Peter on the zoning board?
Yes.
That's what you're saying, yeah.
That's what I was just saying.
Yeah.
Like another member that would sit,
Yeah.
would cause.
Jack Scarborough did that too.
I
that's
just
an
have
RSA.
one thing that I just want to throw out. I think the board should consider adding a few more engineers to our pool, to our pot. Engineers have specialty areas just like any other profession. And I know the past year we've had applications come in, and applicants have had to wait because our engineer, we have one, and he's busy. And with all due respect to him, I just think it would be a good thing to have at least one more engineer that we can pick from. I don't know if it would mean just putting it out there that we're looking for pricing or whatever, but I think it's a good idea for us to have at least one more.
Should we request that the ZBA put out an RFP? I mean, or is that something we would do?
I think that's the select board.
yeah, there's a couple ways.
Because the consulting engineer does a lot of service for the town, right?
Yeah, so he has a specific contract with the
Contract.
planning board that was, the planning board worked with, at the time, the town administrator in 2006 to put out the RFP that was used to hire Mike Vignali. So he does other work for the highway department and other parts of the town, but he also has a specific contract with the planning board for plan review and engineering inspections. So that has been done in the past. It was a committee that the planning board created of some number of planning board members, I think, town administrator at the time, who made that
Sounds like
decision.
Sue needs another committee to head up. The only reason I say that is that it sounds like you have engineering. It sounds like you and Peter might be a good team to seat in that committee, if we were going to
If
do
that's
that.
something that you wanted to explore, I just want to throw it out there, think about
I
it.
wasn't sure.
And we
It
can always-
has crossed my mind, and,
Well, it's just that we've got so many different things, and there's engineers that are great with water, they're great with buildings, they're great with landscape, whatever. And I just feel like throwing everything to one person, and I know Mike's busy, he does a lot of towns, so,
But he does it well too. I mean, the thing I would ask is, how much work do we have to put into this process to change it, and is the benefit worth it? I don't know.
or to add to it. I don't mean getting rid of him by any stretch of the imagination.
Well,
I just think
he
it's
may
nice
have,
to-
there may, I don't know, is that is the agreement exclusive?
if,
It's an old agreement too, I think. isn't
very
it?
old, yeah.
I don't know if it's exclusive. I'd
If
have
I
to
may,
review it.
I think this is a good conversation,
Oh, yeah, I do.
And I think it
I
should-
don't want to shut it down.
and we should have this conversation.
Sure.
And I think it might be a conversation for another evening.
No, that's fine.
Yeah.
I just wanted to get this started.
No, and thank you. And, yeah,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
You could always invite Mike to a meeting
Yeah.
too, if
Yeah,
the board had questions for
Yeah.
him, or.
I appreciate the work he does for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
Right, I'd feel the motion.
Make a motion to adjourn?
I'll second that motion.
All right, so a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor? Aye.
Hey, just a suggestion.
Pulled you in. That almost requires an actual, like,
Yeah, let's do
A joke
we
about
are
it now.
adjourned.